Hello everybody! Today I'll be discussing the surface level of Baroque artwork from the time period, and I'll be describing them and their purpose. But what is Baroque art? Baroque art is a time period just after the Renaissance, originating in Italy in the year 1600 and ending in 1750. And even though it started in Italy, it spread all throughout Europe. Some people confuse Baroque and Renaissance artworks as they are similar in their themes, but there will be some key differences that you cannot unsee once it is pointed out to you. But first, let's look at the four stylistic elements that separate it from Renaissance. First are dynamic poses. Dynamic poses are just poses in motion, where a character looks like they're moving even though they're just a still image, or in this case, a statue, like David is on the left. This is due to the diagonal lines of the body, whether it be the hip and shoulders being at a tilt, or the general action line in the body being a sharp diagonal. It conveys a lot of energy and motion to the viewer. And one of the best ways to know if you're looking at a dynamic pose is to hold the pose and see how long you can hold it. The shorter you can hold it, the more dynamic the pose is. Next is dynamic colors. Here we have David holding the head of Goliath, but I want you to look at the harsh shadows on the one side of his face and the bright highlights on the other side of his face. Extremes, we get a sense of true realism, as if there's a harsh bright light source hitting him just on the side, and there being pure darkness right behind him. This pushes the realism of the piece, creating a realistic texture on the skin, as it pushes the shadows and brings forth the highlights. And even though I just look at David's face, take a gander all around the painting, and you will see the same level of detail and this harsh contrast of light and dark all across the painting. The next is the extreme attention for detail. The third piece in the PowerPoint is not a photograph, but it is actually a still life painting done in Northern Europe, specifically the Netherlands. This was achieved through a oil painting technique called glazing, where you build up 20 to 15 thin but opaque layers of oil paint on canvas in order to create such a high contrast, bright or dark color. Baroque artists truly focused on the attention of detail to the smallest degree to make sure it looked exactly like reality. And finally, we have realistic lighting. And this is light that not only conforms to the contour and surface of a body, but to the texture that the body produces as well. And what I mean by body in this scenario is body of fabric, human body, or just any surface. As we can see, the man in this photo has an oily face, while his clothes look very fabricy. This is due to the intense attention to detail done by Baroque artists. Now let's look at our first piece, because it is going to be a lot. Our first piece is St. Peter on the Appian Way. This piece was created in Italy in 1601 to 1602, and it is a good first piece as it was created just after the Baroque period started. To start, let's see who's in this picture. On the left is Jesus. This is signified by his crown of thorns, the cross he carries, and the red draped cloth over him. On the right is St. Peter, which is signified by the golden blue robes in conjunction with the key on the side of his hip. Now we know without being told because of the use of symbolism in this piece. And symbolism is where an item represents a concept or idea. For example, a broken arrow symbolizes putting aside differences or no longer wanting to fight in a war. And this is how people would communicate who these people were, as literacy rates were not quite high in England, or through all of Europe and Italy for that matter, and thus could effectively communicate to hundreds of people without using a single word. Now let's look closely at the objects in the background. Behind St. Peter's head, we see a building that is significantly smaller than St. Peter. However, if St. Peter was really next to that building, it would tower over him. And this is because of linear perspective, which is where objects get further away and recede to the background until they reach the vanishing point on the horizon line. This is done with orthogonal lines, also known as diagonal lines, which head all the way down to that vanishing point. And this creates an illusion of space, as it mimics real life, where the further something is from you, the smaller it appears, and with less detail as well. And this adds to the realism and attention to detail that I was talking about in Baroque artwork. And this is where some people get confused between Baroque and Renaissance paintings, as Renaissance paintings also focused on realism and had linear perspective in their pieces. Finally, the lighting of this piece makes it look realistic, as the shadows all fall in one direction, which adds to the realism of the piece, and puts the light source in the top right hand of the painting, when in reality, there is no light in the painting as it's all just paint. But this does add a sense of depth, and adds to the realism of the piece with the use of lighting. And finally, take a good look at the poses, puts this piece in the Baroque category as opposed to the Renaissance category. We have Jesus with several diagonal lines. The diagonal of his cross, his arm pointing forward, and his feet are all in diagonal. And in fact, Jesus is walking right now. He looks like he could just straight up walk out of the painting and enter into the real world. And now look at St. Peter. He's caught off guard, his hands are up, and his face is filled with emotion. He is quite shocked to see that Jesus, who was just crucified, is standing right in front of him. His expressions and gestures are exaggerated and uncomfortable looking to hold for a short period of time. And these are the key attributes of what makes Baroque art Baroque art. Now, it's important to know that this piece was made after the Council of Trent, which was a Catholic council in response to the Protestant Reformation. The Council of Trent wanted the Protestant Reformation to end and convert all Protestants back to Catholicism, which was the message behind the piece in the first place. Jesus was having St. Peter return to Rome to found his papacy, which is why he has the key to on his hip, and the Protestants should return back to the Catholic Church. This is where art started to have a true political undertone to it, and hidden messages in the piece, that were being sent to the people all around Europe at the time. Now I want you to compare this piece to the Madonna made in the workshop of Giovanni Bellini. This was a Renaissance painting created in 1510 during the height of the Renaissance era. I chose to include this to show the difference between Baroque artwork and Renaissance artwork. I wanted to highlight the gradual change in art style, as often in history we're told that these time periods are so separate when in reality they change very slowly over time, similar to how society changes slowly over time. But also, I want you to compare these pieces. I want you to write down what is similar about them, and I want you to write down what is different about them. This could be as simple as they are the same as an oil paint used, and as different as they were made nearly a century apart. The more you explore their similarities and differences, the more you'll see the changes of time over society and how art was portrayed and created. Now our next piece was only created a couple of decades later, but it encapsulates the entirety of Baroque art as I mentioned above. Here we have David sculpted by Bellini, an Italian artist. The sculpture demonstrates all of what Baroque art encapsulates. Here we have a piece that is exaggerated with motion, with David's body being totally off balance. His left foot carries all of his weight, and the action line is a sharp S-curve. His face is filled with emotion, with burrowed eyes and clenched lips. This conveys a strong sense of courage in his facial expression. And even his hair looks like it's flowing through the wind, even though it's just made out of marble. And finally, the statue is life-sized. It's at 170 centimeters tall, or 5 feet 5 inches. And it was crafted like this way too. The reason was to show that David was just a human like us, and not some god or man we could not achieve to be. And just like in the last piece, it was another attempt by the Catholic Church to reinforce Catholicism and to get Protestants back into the Catholic faith. And again, I want to compare this piece to an old piece that was created during the Renaissance era. Let's compare Baroque David to Renaissance David. Now, Renaissance David is in contrapposto, which means his hips and shoulders are not aligned, though his figure is overall stagnant, as he is standing still and is quite balanced. His figure is also idealized, meaning it was constructed in a style of the perfect male human body. But the most important thing I want to point out about this piece is that he is 17 feet tall, because back during the Renaissance period, the entire continent of Europe was Catholic, and while there was some turmoil all the time during those regions, overall everyone followed Catholic doctrine. And everyone was basically united under the same religion, and David in this case was a reminder of God and God's power over his creation, hence why he was idealized and created as 17 feet tall. We were not meant to be David, but to look up to David in this case. Whereas in Baroque David, we were meant to be him and relate to him. And I chose to highlight this to signify that art has many significant undertones and meanings behind the surface level iconography that made the art. I also wanted to show how the same character could take a totally different meaning based on the time period and circumstances that he was created in, and what message was being sent to the people based on the current circumstances that society was going through. Now on to our next piece, and there will not be a comparison for this one, so good? Yay? But now I want to highlight a magnificent artist in the Baroque period, Judith Lester. She was a Dutch Baroque artist who was considered equal, if not better, than her peers. I don't highlight her just to show that she's a female artist in a time, but rather to show that times are changing and the world is becoming a slightly more progressive place. Because back during the Baroque period, and medieval Europe, and Baroque Europe in general, women were not treated the best, often being seen as inferior and, unfortunately, second-class citizens compared to men. And during this time period where society was influencing women to be second and men to be on top, it would have been really easy for her male colleagues to disregard her work because she was a woman, but instead they actually praised her work and saw her as equal to them. A big factor of this was a result in the secularization of Northern Europe, mainly the Netherlands and Britain, as just before the Baroque period, Martin Luther started his Protestant Reformation with his 63 Theses to the Catholic Church, which, to greatly oversimplify, was a breakaway or protest against the Catholic Church's power and rule, and decided to make the relationship with Christ more personal rather than governmental or institutional. As in, you yourself could connect to God, and you didn't need a church or figuring body to connect him through them to you. As a result, a lot of Northern European artwork was secular. And secular does not mean atheistic or anti-God, but rather it just means without religion or without a religious undertone in the painting. And a prime example of this would be a self-portrait, like Judith Lester's self-portrait you're seeing right now. As there's no direct connections with religion, and religion is not a center piece in the painting. But despite the lack of religious context in the painting, the Baroque style still exists. And take a look at Judith Lester's self-portrait. She's still rendered realistically, with the different shades of lighting representing her oily skin and her fabric being made out of cloth. And she's still in an uncomfortable pose. She's turning towards us and resting her back of her arm on a chair, which I was able to hold the pose for about 45 seconds before I couldn't take it anymore, which shows that it was still dynamic in this regard. And though it would still be a very, very, very long time before women's rights started moving forward, and women truly had equal rights compared to the men in the Western world, it's still nice to see the early days of women being treated equal to men in this time period. And our final piece is a still life. Again, this is another Dutch painting, and it's again secularized because it is just a still life. And you may have noticed this piece from the PowerPoint above, in the earlier slides of the PowerPoint. Now, by today's standards, this piece would be a masterpiece. It would be worth at least a couple $100,000, and maybe even to the right buyer, $1 million or more. Those still life paintings back during the Baroque period were not considered high art, and were not nearly as valued as much as genre paintings or historical paintings. Essentially, still life paintings back in the day were just kind of like a participation trophy or a you did it. And this was because still lifes had no inherent meaning behind it other than the piece. It was just what was in front of you, as well as there being a lack of challenge in the piece. As in still lifes, the objects don't move, so you don't have to worry about correcting the pieces like you would have to do in a animal drawing, a portraiture, or models for historical or genre painting. And this is where a hierarchy of art comes in. Like I said earlier, the highest value of artworks were the historical paintings, as they not only made the viewer think about what was being presented, but also told messages of history and religion. After all, during this time, only about half the population was able to read, but basically everybody was able to see. And thus, everyone was able to see the history or religion wherever they went, and was able to be taught that, or at least know of it, so the population wouldn't be ignorant to the messages that were being spread to them. Though, one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these artworks were either paid by royal families, such as kings and queens of European nations, or extremely, extremely wealthy merchants, or commissioned by the Catholic Church, trying to push the Catholic view of Christianity on the people of Europe, but more prominently to the Protestants. It is important to keep this in mind because it shows that art made during this time period was made through a filter. How often do you see European Baroque art look stagnant when there's people in the drawing? When does it highlight gods other than the Christian God? Why would have artists strive for historical paintings as opposed to still life or genre paintings? And this was often due to the commissioner of the artwork and the society that they lived in. And I don't say this to condemn or condone the painting's efficacy or style, artist's choice of freedom over the piece, but to show you why these pieces were made and to better understand their true origin of why they were made. And to summarize, Baroque artwork is best seen with dynamic poses, accurate lighting, photorealism, and extreme attention to detail. Northern Europe Baroque art was more secular due to the Protestant Reformation, whereas in Southern Europe, especially Italy, was heavily religious and tried to convince the Protestants to return to Catholicism while reinforcing Catholic beliefs. There was also a hierarchy where historical paintings were at the top and still life was at the bottom. Women artists began to have a foothold and voice in the art world and were even respected by the male artists in the male-dominated field. And most importantly, the citation page, baby. Oh yeah, check out these sources. I'll probably link them in the description below if I remember, but no promises. But yeah, I did not think of any of these things off my head. I have 9 sources up here if I remember correctly. And I'd like to say 2 things before you go. 1, thanks for watching, and 2, I would really like to emphasize I am only scratching the surface of the Baroque art world. And I actually chose pieces that I would talk the least about, because there are some Italian churches made during this time period that I could drone on by themselves for about 20 to 30 minutes, and that there's a lot of artwork and history that comes with these art pieces made during the time period. And furthermore, there are a lot of online resources online that you can go and explore this artwork if you are so interested in, or if you just want to be very knowledgeable on a niche subject of history, though a very important one for the Western world and for all of Europe. Anyways, again, thanks for watching, and make sure you have a good day.